God of War was always deep, you cowards. Now, off the rip, I don't necessarily disagree with this statement. I don't know anything about the video. I'm not necessarily a huge God of War fan. I really like the first two. I like the first two games a lot. Third one was still pretty damn good. It felt a little bit try hard, but still really fun. Not as good as the first two. And then the fourth one fucking blew, and I've not played the fifth one. So let's find out what this video has to say. The 1 hour of reaction starts now. We will get through as many as I can. And yeah, Jimmy boy, you requested this. This is for you.
I can't stand the conversation around the new God of War. Now, I want to make it clear, I am not complaining about the game itself. I beat it, I liked it a lot. But what's really been putting a bee in my bonnet,
I'm already going to be annoyed if this is only about the new God of War games, because again, the fourth one sucked, so I didn't play the fifth. Like, when he says God of War was always deep, you cowards, I thought he meant the series God of War. I hope he doesn't just mean the game God of War, which shouldn't be called God of War, because that's the name of the first fucking game, and this is the fourth one. But that's also a stupid trend in Hollywood and video games lately. Continuing
on it is a sentiment regarding the story that's been pushed ad nauseum, and that is the notion that the story of God of War and the characterization of Kratos used to be shallow dog shit, but now has become a deep and enriching narrative experience.
Okay, so it is going to defend the OGs. Dodged a bullet or a thrown hand axe, whatever.
Kratos games and the God of War games have been so enjoyable, but now it's really about getting to know this character and the relationship that he has with the people that he cares about that hits you right here.
Calliope!
Father?
My child.
Why did you go?
Out the gate. That is so funny. Like, you got this reporter dude be like, "Oh, we've never seen Kratos, bond over the ones he loved before. This shows that he's real. He's got humanity now." Entire plot of the first three fucking games is him murder fucking the gods for what they did to his family. And yeah, he did look kind of like Chris Gore. You're right.
I am here now, child, and I will not leave you again.
He gives Kratos so much more depth than what I was expecting. It's more meaningful, it's more powerful, and it's better in its storytelling and its concept.
This depth and complexity transforms Kratos from the previous God of War games as flat embodiment of the bloodthirsty warrior cliché into an internally conflicted father.
The choice.
Yes, do my job for it. I don't even have to react to this. Like, just keep playing cutscenes from the OG games. That's all you have to fucking do.
Was clear to him, yet impossible to make. To stay with his daughter meant the end of the world and the end of her. To stop Persephone and Atlas would mean forsaking his daughter forever.
The way they humanize Kratos is really important and cannot be understated, because this is a character from the era where, like,
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna walk this back just a little bit. This dude talks like fucking Kamala Harris. Like this is the Kamala cadence. Listen to this.
Forsaking his daughter forever.
The way they humanize Kratos is really important and cannot be understated, because
is that not the Kamala cadence?
This is a character from the era where, like, dads don't cry, basically, right?
He is pretty one note and also not subtle at all. And they managed to endow this character with
the left
like
doesn't
humanity
get,
and nuance.
They tend to change.
I will serve them, and they will keep their promise to free me from my past. I ask you, Spartan,
Hey, you beautiful red-headed bitch, you.
promise of an Olympian. It is all I have.
Yeah, not only are we tired of seeing weak men, but don't get me wrong, we are tired of seeing weak men. But we're tired of seeing just non-men, and by that I don't mean women. I mean that characters that are that lack any sense of what traditional masculine, because you can be a weak man and that can work for a story because the character can be written to be a weak man, and as part of their character growth is, they come into their own, the hero's journey, they become a strong man by the end. Or maybe they're like Scar, they're like in The Lion King, they're a physically weak man, so they have to rely on their cunning and their conniving sensibilities. No, we're tired of seeing characters that lack the concept of masculinity.
I played the other ones, and they're fine. At the time, they were like fun, over the top, gory. It was kind of like, I guess it's kind of like Call of Duty, where you just go, I'm gonna go in.
I never played Ghost of Sparta, by the way.
For this one,
I only played the first
like
three.
Marvel at the set
none of the
pieces.
spin-offs.
Is kind of like what that was. We've seen games where they try to tell an interesting story and be weighty and meaningful, and we're going to try and do it too with the character who cannot possibly do this.
By the gods, what have I become?
Kratos was a blank slate.
I'm not saying Ghost of Sparta is bad. I just never
character who saw nothing but blood and spoke of nothing but feasting.
What's up, Leaper?
I am so sorry, my love.
Bro, can we take a moment to acknowledge these visuals hold up pretty damn well? Like I don't know. Did they ever do a God of War remastered trilogy? I don't know if they did or not. Frankly, wouldn't even really need to remaster the third one. It was on PS3, so it was already in HD. But if this is the original PS2 and not upscaled, this has to be upscaled. Either way, these visuals hold up real damn well.
Ever forgive me.
God of War 2018 is about the pain of losing someone and finally coming to terms with that. The quest to conquer the emotions that take over in these trying times.
Okay,
all
HD remastered on PS3
can be yours once again. If this is what keeps you in service to Lord Ares, then this is what you shall have.
It is not real.
It's about being a single father. It's about teaching your son how to survive in a cruel world. It's about the struggle of building the bond between father and son.
The fires of hope will set us free.
Pandora, no!
You know why I'm here. You brought me here to do this.
I will find another way.
No, Kratos. There is no other way. Let me go!
No, child!
I am not a child! You're hurting me!
This game has made Kratos so much more complex. It's fleshed him out in ways that I didn't think were...
I love Jeremy Johns, but damn, this is a dog shit take. Rare L for Jeremy.
Possible or even necessary. I was fine with Kratos being the Ghost of Sparta, the kick-ass machine I always knew him as. I didn't know I wanted him to be something else.
You and me both, buddy. You and me
Deimos.
both.
He needs you.
Mother! What have I done?
Now that they have added complexity to him, to this degree in this level, I can't ever see me in my perception of Kratos going back. How did I ever feel like Kratos of old was enough?
See, and here's where I think that people, because let's be real, God of War started off as a fucking Devil May Cry knockoff. That's what it was. It was a Devil May Cry knockoff set in ancient Greece. Now, obviously, it very much became its own thing, but that's what it started off as. And people seem to remember OG Kratos like he's Dante, just purely existing on the rule of cool. When that is absolutely, like even Dante's got some character to him, but let's be real, Dante pretty much fucking exists on the rule of cool. And people think of old God of War games because they play like Devil May Cry. They must also be written like Devil May Cry. And that's absolutely not the case. No, I agree it's a character action game. What I'm saying is people romanticize they misremember the character part as not existing because the gameplay is similar. It's a hack and slash that's all about brutal combos like Devil May Cry. So they paint Kratos the same. And it's a complete misremembrance of otherwise great games.
I'll agree.
You fool!
God of War was already deep, you cowards. I don't know whether to blame marketing, dishonesty, ignorance, people having the memory spans of goldfish, or all of the above.
See, of all those, I would say memory spans of goldfish. Like that is like there's so many classic PS2 games. The PS2 had a massive library, one of the most expansive, if not the most expansive library of any platform ever. So I understand people like memory holding certain games and franchises and stuff to that effect, but dude, God of War was that was one of the standout games on the PS2. So people are retarded. It just really boils down to people are retarded.
For the weirdly unanimous downplaying of one of the most seminal, in more ways than one, game series of the last 20 years. A series, mind you, that upon its debut was met with the exact same awestruck acclaim specifically for the depth of its story and character. How many action games to this day open with the lead character mournfully attempting suicide? Oh, but now he's complex because he reaches out for his kid.
By the way, that's how I start every stream before the camera starts rolling, is attempting suicide. And then I remember all of you guys, and I think, God damn it, gotta take the gun out my mouth this time, and maybe next week.
But he can't
joking,
do it.
By the way,
yeah, too bad he did the exact same thing in God of War 3. Remember this scene? The part wherein escorting Pandora slowly reawakens his buried paternal compassion, and Kratos realizes the revenge he's done all of this to achieve isn't worth sacrificing her life for, desperately begging her to find another way. Once again, the gaming press are selling out the medium they claim to love in a vain effort to convince Roger Ebert's ghost that games have finally matured. It's not enough that this game have a good story. Let's go ahead and throw all the previous games under the bus so you know we mean it this time. You hype wave surfing sycophants are acting as though Kratos being a father, regretting his past, and hating the man he was is some totally unforeseen, bold new step for the character. Did you even play the old games?
This is far, but they've done something here with the character. They've turned water into wine.
You didn't play the other God of War.
Very limited experience. Very limited. I played the demo of 3.
From the first second.
Did motherfucker just say? After saying they've turned water into wine, admit he didn't even play the original 3 games except the demo for the 3rd one? Bro, again, politics aside, game journalists are we say it all the time, they're not fucking gamers.
Of the first game, Kratos was a man tortured by his own past, haunted by his sins, used and betrayed by the gods, and slowly losing what little humanity he had left. Robbed of that humanity, with nothing left to live for but vengeance, he viciously brutalizes his way through the entire Greek pantheon, destroying the entire world in the process, and ultimately realizing that while his vengeance may be complete, his atonement can only come from ending his own life, or at least attempting to.
I'm not going to say they were never gamers, though, Leonard, because earlier in the show, we were talking about the death of Game Informer, and like, if you read Nintendo Power, or Game Pro, or PlayStation Magazine, or Game Informer, or any of these other outlets growing up, tips and tricks, like, they were gamers. These games journalists were gamers. Then fucking Gamergate happened. That's the shift, was the original Gamergate in 2014.
That is a 3-dimensional character with a well-told character arc. Throughout the series, we are constantly shown glimpses of the fading humanity and compassion beneath Kratos' brutal exterior,
I think you are
only to share
correct.
in his profound shame and self-loathing at the end of the trilogy, as that humanity nearly completely flickers away, culminating in the ruination of Earth and mass murder of all mankind, wrought by his quest for vengeance, as well as the death of the very last person he wanted to protect. Kratos spends the series simultaneously racked with guilt and self-loathing, yet consumed by rage and hatred for his enemies. This dichotomy forms the core conflict of the character, and which side ultimately wins out was left in the air all the way up to the end. People talk about Breaking Bad making them more and more uncomfortable rooting for a protagonist who is slowly becoming a villain, having to question.
This is actually a really good comparison. Comparing Kratos to Walter White from like the original 3 games is a really good comparison. I'd say the only difference is, but I think Kratos' motivations are altruistic, or at least by comparison are far more altruistic than Walter White. So it is still easier to root for him. But as a general comparison, yeah, I like this.
For themselves, how far is too far? Well, the God of War series asks the same question, making it harder and harder to sympathize with the protagonist as his brutality and destructive cruelty increases. Up until a certain point, Kratos had gotten away with being a vicious killer while still remaining sympathetic. But all that sympathy flew out the window right around the time the game forced me to jam this girl into a gear and listen to her spine snap in half. Jeez, Kratos, you could have just, I don't know, asked her to hold it? You know, I'm starting to think we made a mistake giving a guy whose last name is Of War the Peace Prize. Hey, don't blame me, I voted for Kratos. Look, you could argue that this scene and others like it were unnecessary and tasteless, many have, but it does reinforce the theme that by this point, Kratos has fucking lost it. If there's one thing the original...
But has he lost it? Because the gods are fucking dicks. Every single story of, like, real Greek mythology go out of their way to mention how the gods are fucking dicks.
Trilogy succeeds at, it's making it clear Kratos is not a hero. He's a selfish, vicious supervillain. But the thing that makes him an interesting, complex character, or deep, is the fact that he knows this about himself. Kratos does not like...
See, in that respect, he is not even a villain. Maybe you can make the argument for anti-hero. He's honestly very similar, albeit a lot more adult-oriented, to Shadow the Hedgehog in that regard. Like, they know who they are. They know what they've got to do. They do the uncomfortable things that nobody else will do. But they are necessary things. I mean, maybe you can make a case for that being evil. The path to hell paved with good intentions. But I don't know. I still don't think I could call Kratos the villain. I'm not knowing what the gods are like
himself. In fact, he hates himself way more than he hates the gods, and his entire vendetta against them is a thinly veiled tantrum of projection. That's what makes the human aspect of the story work. The fact that Kratos is a terrible, violent hypocrite and hates himself for it. That's not new.
I saw Zeus torture my father. I saw him beat him because of me. I should have told him that I was afraid.
Hephaestus did what every father should do. Protect his child. My beautiful Pandora.
I'm a bad man, give it bad man, bad looks, dress amongst thieves and crooks.
The new game did not invent this depth to his personality. It was always there and clearly a part of the story.
No, in fact, I would argue that the new games take away from that depth because they are trying so hard to forget the past, basically. Like George Lucas said it best. It's like poetry, it rhymes. And yeah, we make fun of him for it and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy still flow into one another as a continuous story. The problem with God of War, like the reboot, is it's very much that. It is a reboot. There's literally no real continuation of Kratos as the character that we knew him, because it's like they're ashamed of it and want to rewrite him.
From the beginning. Granted, the new game expands on...
And in rewriting, and might I add, in rewriting him, they effectively write him the same, but far worse. So nothing is... In attempting to change things so drastically, they end up just giving us the same thing.
This aspect of his personality in a logical and well-written way, but
yes,
it was there. I remember God of War 3 being one hell of an experience and not always a pleasant one. A character who I had rooted for and cared about for years had gone too far and turned completely heel in my mind,
I played Ragnarok,
whilst I was still playing as him, doing the things that I no longer felt justified in doing. I mean, for crap's sake, you even kill Hercules in this game. I don't want to kill Hercules. I like that guy. And while I had previously...
I like Kevin Sorbo as well.
...empathized with Kratos...
And I definitely like Lucy Lawless.
Kratos' remorse, anger, and desire for vengeance, it was in beginning to hate the character that I finally fully empathized with him, because now I was empathizing with and sharing the most important part of the character, his shame and self-loathing. By the time God of War 3 was over, I hated Kratos as much as Kratos hated Kratos, and I applauded his final decision to atone by murdering himself. And like it or not, that whole scenario that I just described, that's art, motherfucker. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Nowadays, a game can only be considered art if it comes in the form of an extended single-parent simulator. But even that's hypocritical, because you know what? If you want to talk about being a parent, the old games had just as much of that newly applauded daddy depth, if not more. God of War 1 ends with one of the most memorable and heartfelt subversions of a game's core philosophy and gameplay mechanics that I've ever seen. After an entire game of Kratos seeking revenge against Ares for manipulating him into killing his own family, the final showdown pulls Kratos into a nightmare realm of his own tortured memories, wherein he sees his lost family, surrounded and beset on all sides by dark doppelgangers of himself, representing his own original sin. You have to fight off this army of yourself, and all the while the circle button, which up to that point was used primarily to rip enemies in half, is now being used to sacrifice health to your family and protect them from yourself by hugging them. Here we have a seamless blend.
When he says it like that, it's almost as if Sweet Baby Inc was involved in this one as well. However, that's, this is back when games were good, so this works. Like there is a way to do subversion correctly, and I like the case he's making for good subversion here.
Ending of story and gameplay that works as a crazy boss battle, an emotional climax to Kratos' arc, and a metaphor for the guilt that defines him. When it comes to blending the emotional core of the story into the gameplay, not even the new game succeeds this gracefully. And if that's not enough to convince you of the series' previous pathos and depth, let me give you another example. And this is probably my favorite moment in the whole series. It's at the end of one of the PSP games. Persephone, the unwilling consort of Hades, grows weary of her imprisonment in the underworld and so hatches a scheme to destroy all of creation.
Clearly, Blue Collar, you weren't listening earlier when I made the comparison to God of War and DMC.
To this end, she convinces Kratos to give up his strength and weapons so that he may enter the Elysium fields and be reunited with his daughter.
That was my very
Goliath.
first TV crush.
No! I will not let the gods take her from me again!
Yeah, he didn't really think that one through. Upon realizing that if Persephone succeeds in destroying everything, Calliope ceases to exist as well, Kratos must turn his back on his daughter and reclaim his scary powers to kick ass and never see her again. Once again, this literal Greek tragedy is relayed via gameplay as you, the player, have to mash the circle button in order to push and pry your crying daughter off of you, abandoning her forever in order to save her. Ugh. Excuse me, I feel a tear coming out of this eye. That's just as emotionally poignant as anything in the new game, and it's not done via dialogue-heavy cutscene. It's done in a way that deliberately subverts the violence.
And there's the difference. He says it's not done in a dialogue-heavy cutscene. If the new God of War game, because I haven't played the sequel, if God of War 4, wasn't basically a fucking movie, maybe I'd have some more respect for it. But the idea of video games is that they are an interactive medium. So just like when the rules of a movie are show, don't tell, the rules of a video game should be like feel more than show and tell. I don't know if that makes fucking sense, but I think you guys are picking up what I'm putting down.
So the rest of the gameplay, creating a moment of empathy between the player and Kratos as we perform a task that surprisingly comes off more uncomfortable
Also, what up, Zach?
than any of the standard QTE executions the player has long since gotten used to. That shit is fucking brilliant. The reason that Kratos' moments of humanity and regret for his lost family worked so powerfully in the old games is because they subverted the brutal and fast-paced nature of the typical gameplay surrounding those moments and contrasted with the raging monster that Kratos was for the bulk of the experience. The majority of the time spent in these games presents Kratos as an unstoppable killing machine, so that just when you forget he's a human being, that humanity sneaks up on you and is all the more effective. The dichotomy of these two sides to Kratos' personality is what makes the character special. If anything, having Atreus tag along every step of the way, relentlessly taking every opportunity to remind you that Kratos cares for his son, is taking away from the impact of that dichotomy. Yeah, I know Kratos is a human being now. The game never gives me a chance to forget. The game hasn't introduced
Fucking bingo! I don't even know if I have anything to add to that. He's just correct here.
A new side to Kratos. It's just reversed the two sides that were already there, putting the human aspect front and center for the majority of the game, while occasionally relenting that he's still a little bit of a big scary badass. The contradiction between Kratos' nature as a perfect warrior and his nature as a bereaved father seeking peace is there to some degree. It's alluded to and talked about at great length, but you never actually experience
I completely disagree. You say the new game's story doesn't work without the old games. God of War, as in God of War 4, was the first game for many God of War players. And in some cases, the new ones are the only ones they've played. And this you could follow the story just fine, which you could argue is a good thing, but I disagree because the character of Kratos is completely different. So you don't have it's like starting with the sequel trilogy in Star Wars. Yeah, sure, you could pick up on Luke's character. But that character is completely fucking wrong and antithetical to what he was in the entire build-up before. You could start with The Force Awakens, absolutely, and you will be able to follow, well, sort of, the sequel trilogy. But if it doesn't actually correlate or hold any meaning to the original trilogy and to the prequel trilogy, then what's the goddamn point? Because you're not actually making a sequel. You're making an entirely new game that's just got the same fucking name.
Kratos attempts to show his enemies mercy and doesn't even really lose his temper that much. Even the kill animations are tame compared to the old stuff. If anything, they're more stylish than scary. Kratos is kinder, gentler, more merciful, even somewhat polite in this game.
Yeah, I know, but
going as far to chastise the boy for remarking rudely on a character's skin color. And I get it. This is who Kratos is now, and it fits the story being told. But some of the effectiveness is lost by not seeing exactly how hardcore the character can be, and that's simply not in this game. The only reason I can fully appreciate Kratos' growth is because I played the old games to see the cruel bastard he was firsthand. And that's my main point, really. This game is great, but it would be worthless if not for the games that preceded it. Let me make it clear, I love how Kratos is portrayed in this game. It makes sense from a character perspective that after the events of the previous games, Kratos is a changed man. He's still capable of violence and viciousness, but for the most part, he's finally achieved some degree of peace and is desperate to hold on to it.
I can't argue
Kratos is at long last truly repentant in the new game. For the first time in the series, he's actually a good guy, and that's cool. But the reason why it's cool for Kratos to be a down-to-earth, grumbly dad mourning for his wife and taking care of his kid is because we know the man he used to be. If these stories didn't exist, then this story would be boring and worthless. Joel.
And he is correct. If the original 3 didn't exist, it would be boring and worthless. The problem is, so many fucking troglodytes on the internet who think they got some sort of media literacy, who never played the originals, still think the new one is a fantastic fucking story, which makes no goddamn sense. Because in a vacuum, it isn't. It is an objectively bad story that people laud as being amazing. I get why fans of God of War like God of War 4, because they've played the previous games. Like Jim, I get why you like God of War 4. I can't fucking stand God of War 4, but the people who have never played any of the others, I cannot wrap my head around why they would like that game, aside from sheer unadulterated pretentiousness.
From The Last of Us is boring. But if I know that Joel used to be this guy, that's interesting. And that's the narrative hook that makes this story possible. You can turn the road into a video game if you want, but I already played it. Twice. Or 3 times. 4? Oh god, I forgot about all these. See what I mean? Call it mature and deep if you want, but it's also derivative as fuck. And the only thing that makes this particular example unique is the fact that this time, the dad is fucking Kratos. The same guy who used to snap necks and cash checks, raping and vaping all over ancient Greece. Everybody who talks about this game acts like they're—
I feel like you suggested this video just for raping and vaping. Like, I took a fat hit right as he fucking said that. You knew what you were doing, Jimmy boy.
Ashamed of the old games, because this one has a deep story. But the story of the old games is the reason the story of the new game gets to be deep. The new God of War stands on the shoulders of its own narrative heritage, and yet everyone is attempting to bury that heritage to build it up. But I'm afraid I've got some bad news. If you're burying the thing you're standing on, you don't get higher. you get lower. So if that's the way you're going to talk about the series, then you might as well call this one God of War Descension. Look, at the end of the day, deep is a nebulous term, and you can define it however you want. But the fact is, these games are loaded with pathos, personality, and an over-the-top but ultimately serious story about the cost of revenge, the elusive hope of redemption, and loss of humanity. And even disregarding all that, in a purely practical sense, this was a series that took all of Greek mythology and successfully combined it into a single cohesive narrative. That alone is a literary feat on par with the 12 Labors of John Cena. The original 900 God of War games weren't just a good action series. They were a good story. One that can actually be called epic in the true sense of the word. If there's an argument to be made for video games not being art, then gamers are that argument. Because no other artistic medium is constantly dismissed by its own community. A community willing to disregard and disrespect anything that came out more than 5 years ago in favor of the newer, prettier, more cinematic version. I don't seem to recall Creed being met with declarations.
That is why people are ashamed of the old games, because you can literally tear heads off and there's boobs. Like, people will overlook what is deep in a story for surface level bullshit because it sounds good in a fucking Kotaku article. Or at least it sounds good to your legion of followers that don't have any personality outside of pronouns in their fucking bio.
That Rocky is now obsolete. I played God of War for the PS4 to completion, and I'll happily tell you that I found it both very well written and very cleverly written. I'm not trying to take away anything from the new game, but I can say, confidently and emphatically, that it's a tremendous disservice to both the original games and the team.
You're correct, Blue Collar. He's not Mario or Sonic. He is Shadow. Kratos goes through the exact same character arc as Shadow the Hedgehog in Sonic Adventure 2, just in a far more adult-oriented way. So I get what you're trying to say, but it doesn't really make sense when you juxtapose him with another Sonic character instead of Sonic, who does fit the archetype.
Teams that created them to undersell the depth of their narratives in a vain, disingenuous attempt to sell the new one on its story and characters. The old games had a story too, and it was a good one. Kratos was three-dimensional and had pathos coming out the wazoo long before he had a son to protect. So take your dishonest marketing and your revisionist history and shove them up Kratos' butt right alongside the immersive new camera. Because the old God of War games were as deep as the dankest depths of Tartarus. And that's the double truth, Zeus.
That was good. Drop this guy a like. That was excellent. There you go.
Today you make.
Oh wow, that was a 6-year-old video too. Wow, excellent. Yeah, good. Good recommendation there, Jim. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that quite a bit. Very, very well done. A good way to start this off.